Hi guys. So in order to understand yourself better, in order to understand the areas where you're going wrong, you need to get to grips with the things that happen on a subconscious level. Now, there's a whole lot going on for us on a subconscious level, and oftentimes these can be the main driver of our behaviors, of our thoughts, of our reactions, of the ways in which we interpret the world and the ways in which we interpret other people. And it's so ingrained in us. It kind of happens in a very automated fashion, and as a result, we're not aware of it. And oftentimes, our subconscious is very much a result of our early years or our formative years experience. And particularly if there was any trauma or turmoil that happened at the time, or if for any reason we felt unsafe or insecure, it can greatly impact on the way in which we interpret the world, the way in which we see things, and the way in which we engage in other people. I mean, ultimately, if you felt very unsafe growing up, you're going to find it very hard to trust the world to be a safe place, and to trust people to be there for you, to support you. Now, that being said, oftentimes we subconsciously, which is bizarre, try to recreate these patterns in our adult life. And the reason for this is it's because it feels safe to us, despite the fact that it was traumatic, or that, isn't a healthy experience. It feels like our normal. So we tend to be either drawn to relationships and circumstances that recreate the feelings of insecurity, that recreate the pain that we experienced in our childhood, or when we're in relationships or when we're in certain circumstances, we interpret them as being the same as our childhood experience. So an example might be if you grew up with a mother who was very detached and very cold and didn't meet your emotional needs, that you would tend to be drawn to partners who don't necessarily have the ability to connect with you on an emotional level. Or you may get into a relationship with somebody who is sufficient enough at meeting your emotional needs, and yet you interpret their behaviors as not meeting your needs. So you're nearly hyper vigilant for any signs of, emotional distance or disconnect. And I suppose it's important to note that there are the two possibilities, that it's not necessarily the situations and the relationships that you get into that are to blame, that oftentimes it can be your interpretation of them. That being said, because we are recreating pain, because we are recreating distressing experiences for ourselves, we tend to rely on whatever coping mechanisms we have found that enable us not to have to be present. Now, I suppose addictions, when we think of them, we normally think of drugs or alcohol, and yet any addiction is, or an addiction is anything that we utilize in order to prevent us having to deal with emotional trauma or emotional pain, that give us a form of escapism that we crave, and that ultimately give us short-term relief but have long-term negative consequences. And this includes a whole array of things. I mean, everything from using your phone, pornography, for using food, for using drugs, alcohol, but also the way that we behave. I mean, we can be addicted to things like lashing out at others. We can be addicted to things like stonewalling, basically withdrawing from our life so that we don't have to deal with things. These are all behaviors that are highly addictive because we have used them to provide relief for us for so long. Now, ultimately, in order to rectify this situation and to, I suppose, cease the patterns, to intervene in the patterns that are repeating over and over, you first of all have to create an awareness of the ways in which you're recreating the patterns. You have to become aware of your internal experiences and your interpretations, and the way in which they're causing you distress and harm and impacting on areas of your life. So oftentimes we need somebody to objectively sit with us and bring us through this. And it's a difficult process because you need to visit the childhood pain, you need to visit the childhood trauma, you need to try and heal it, to work through it, to navigate your way through it. identify the ways in which it is impacting on your interpretation of the world, on your experiences, and then look at, I suppose, creating a new way of seeing the world, creating a new way of engaging in relationships based on the knowledge of your tendency to view things a certain way. So, okay, you're always going to have that initial childhood reaction. However, once you become aware of it, once you have healed through it, you're able to notice it, and you're able to transcend it. So move beyond it, and make different choices, better choices, and, you know, kind of see people in a less harmful manner, you know, and you have more benevolence, you have kind of more peace of mind and a greater sense of autonomy. Now, that being said, it is a difficult process, because ultimately the coping mechanisms, the addictions that we create in order to protect ourselves in our formative years, they're like a safety blanket. They can be extremely difficult to shift, and we tend to, our subconscious wants to fight tooth and nail, because as I said, they have a very preservative aspect in our lives. They've kept us safe for so long, but ultimately they're maladaptive. They work against us in our relationships, and they're the root cause of a lot of our unhappiness. So, I mean, it's again kind of switching it over, and this time going through a little bit of short-term pain in order to have long-term relief, long-term freedom, and long-term contentment and peace of mind. So it is a worthwhile journey, even though it can be quite difficult at the onset. If this is something you feel is anyways, I suppose, applicable to your life or to your relationships, get in touch with me on the website. It's fundamentals.ie. You'll also catch all of my content on Facebook and Instagram. Just look up Fundamentals. I do regular videos on my YouTube channel, which is called Fiona Feely. Lots of content there, looking at mental health, looking at the ways in which we self-sabotage, looking at ways in which we can find a more fulfilling way to live. And I also do a regular podcast with Neil O'Brien. It's called Touchy and Feely. It's available on iTunes and Spotify. So go check it out if you'd like a listen, and let me know what you think.